All right. Last but not least, certainly, ECOLANT Chief Consultant Young-ho Baik will offer his lecture under the title, Is Urban Lighting Required for the Establishment of Carbon Neutrality? So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Baik Young-ho.
안녕하세요.
Hello everyone, I am Young-ho Baik. As Professor Zhang explains a lot, there's not much for me to add. However, I will talk about how we can achieve carbon neutrality. When I see the topic, I had a lot of thoughts and concerns because carbon neutrality is very wide and the lighting is very limited area. So how can I connect these two is the biggest concern for me while preparing for this presentation. So I'd like to share my concern. How can I move to the next page? Well, the theme, my presentation has 3 parts. I will start with climate change. I think many of you are familiar with that, and I will move on to the carbon neutrality or net zero. And as Professor Zhang deep dive into this area, so I will wrap it up with urban lighting. So we are almost to 6 p.m. here in Korea. This is more like dinner time, so I feel like a little bit hungry, so my energy level is a little low, but I just put the 1% on the screen. Let me just explain what it means. It can be very minor, but the 1% means a lot. 1% in the interest rate or the stock market or GDP, that is huge. So the 1% can make you laugh or cry. We are investing heavily to reduce 1% of carbon emissions. So I'd like to talk about 1%. In terms of lighting, we are able to dedicate to reduce 1% of carbon emission. Many are concerned about that. So many are thinking about and calculating how much the lighting can contribute to the reduction of the GHG emissions. So that is the starting point of my concern and worry for the future. And how we can realize to reduction in the GHG with 1% and what kind of roles of lighting should do. So let me just explain it. So I think you are familiar with these kind of images and explanations. We have a lot of wildfires and droughts and flooding and the cyclones as well. And as we have more cyclones and the wind power is becoming unstable. I'm not an expert in this area, but I just get a lot of references. There is a NASA, an American agency, and it says that the fact of human causes global warming are happening right now. So what that means is that there are so many issues related to the climate change and the global warming, and the era we are living in and the future we will live in, we'll see more serious the effect of the climate change more often and more seriously. And the IPCC says that, taken as a whole, the range of published evidence indicates that the net damage cost of climate change are likely to be significant and to increase over time. So when it comes to the climate change, we always talk about human activities or human-caused crisis. And the human-caused crisis worsen the future, and it will have a negative impact on the global warming and climate change. We have scientific research that supports this kind of claim. There are many references out there. I just quote some of the NASA's references. The first is that change will continue through this century and beyond. So throughout the long history and long time to come, there will be climate change, and our efforts to stop the global warming will take a longer time, according to the expert group. And the second part is the temperature will continue to rise. According to, we can see a lot of agricultures which used to be farmed in the lower southern part are coming up to the northern part. That means temperature have been rising, and it will continue to rise. Personally, we have a very long summer this year, so I just wonder when we have the fall and the temperature drops dramatically from last week, so we can see clearly how global warming is happening. And in the USA, it has become very serious issue, which is about the frost-free season. And the frost-free season is getting longer and longer, and that have a direct impact on the agriculture. And that means the food network and the food supply chain might have a big negative impact as a result of it. And the next is that the more drought and heat waves. We see a lot of these news articles and news headlines these days, and more drought and the heat waves have another impact on the agriculture and also our living environment. So I think all of us will see this kind of impact in our daily lives. Just a couple of years ago, I don't see the effect of the climate change, but I can see that very recently in a dramatic way. So if you go to the southern part of Asia or the USA, they suffer seriously from increasing number of hurricanes and flooding, things like that. So we have clearly witnessed how global warming and climate change have an impact on our daily lives. If it stops as it is, then that is a lucky scenario for us. However, it will worsen in the future, so we need to prepare for these kind of upcoming situations. I just look up all the abnormal weather conditions occurred in the Asian continent, and I try to understand what kind of issue Asian people are suffer from. And there are a lot of abnormal weather conditions happened in the October of 2020. It ranges from Indonesia, India, Thailand, China, and the Philippines. Many countries in the region suffer from the abnormal weather conditions. I just get these images from Asia. If you expand your perspective to the world, then you may see a lot more cases. So with these pictures, we can clearly see how the climate change is now occurring, and Korea is not immune to this kind of situation. While preparing for this presentation, I use Google a lot to search. So if you put the keyword climate change, in 0.4 seconds, you can see 400,000 results. That means people are highly interested in that. You can see the related keywords like COP26, things like that. I just captured the one news article released very recently. This is released from WHO. They are having very difficult time because of the pandemic, and they highlight not only about the vaccines, but also about the responding and adapting to the climate change. They released the latest news, what says that the unsustainable choices that are killing our planet and killing people. The biggest single threat to human being is climate change. So I just wonder why they, out of nowhere, talk about the climate change while we still suffer from pandemic. But I think the single biggest threat to human public health is the climate change. So the climate change is clearly considered as a serious threat by the WHO as well. As you can see on the screen, I just get some headlines of the October. And the Brazil's hydroelectric reservoirs hit a record low due to extreme drought. And another headline says that in Europe, because of climate change, flood increases and wind reduces, resulting in dramatic reduction in wind power generation. And very recently, you may see this kind of news articles. 30% of coal in China comes from Shanxi, China, but which is hit hardest by the unprecedented flooding, making power supply more unstable. They have to shut down all the schools and factories because of that. One interesting article says that 85% of human beings are living in the area that are directly affected by the climate change. And the 50% is still living in the area which is not 100% safe from the climate change, but most and much of the population are living in the area that are heavily affected by the climate change. Just like in the Hamlet, we are now living in the era of adapt or die warning. So these are the international news articles that talks about the climate change. And if you look into the domestic situation, we are still seeing a lot of the climate change effect, which is not that much serious, but that is increasing. We even have this kind of news articles which says why the next 5-year plan is a game changer for the global climate diplomacy. So global climate change and the global warming is playing a game changer to the diplomacy as well. Then climate change itself can be a very important element to make changes in the international power and international diplomacies. I didn't get it clearly when I read it, but we have many events related to the climate change, including COP26. So I feel like many more people are recognizing the importance of climate change. So I tried to look up the references, a domestic reference. So there is the reference saying how Korean government and Korea as a whole is responding to the climate change. The government is very quick to respond to that, but in general, the awareness of the public is pretty low about the climate change, and the commercial and industries haven't failed to suggest and announce any tangible plan to reduce their emission cuts. And I just look up another reference. What it says is that given Korea is a little bit behind the global trend, so Korea is one of the country not to meet 1.5 degrees Celsius temperature goal. Whenever I read news articles and the daily news, the Korean governments try to say they are doing their best, but in general, from the global perspective, Korean government's efforts is a little bit considered as not enough. So I think that is largely coming from the low level of public awareness. Let me just read it as I quote it from Global.
removal or by eliminating emission from society. 그래서 요거를 간단하게 말씀드리면은 발생도 줄여.
To sum it up, we have to reduce the generation and we also have to remove the remaining emissions based on the social solidarity.
Releasing processes associated with the transportation, energy production, agricultural and industry에서 많은 책임을 이제 전가하는 게 좀 나와요. 그리고
So this is kind of a finger pointing. The transportation should be responsible for reducing the carbon dioxide. Not only transportation, but also the agriculture industry should be responsible for the emission of carbon dioxide. Because I have been involved in the lighting for quite a long, I just wonder why they didn't talk about the urban lighting. So I just wonder if urban lighting or the lighting in general is not responsible for emitting GHG gases. As Professor Chung explained, we have a big impact on the global warming as well. I just look up the language, the jargon, carbon neutrality in many different languages. So carbon neutrality can be described in different ways according to their language, but let me just give you the definition of carbon neutrality. It is a concept of reducing greenhouse gas emissions due to human activities as much as possible and absorbing and removing the remaining greenhouse gases to make actual emission zero. To make GHG gas emission zero is physically impossible because given the pattern of human activities, it's largely dependent on the consumption, so it is almost impossible. The definition also says that we are achieving the state of the zero. We are not it's not about achieving the zero emissions, but we are making the net zero between the generation and reduction. And this, if you type in the carbon neutrality into the Google, you can have more than 25.6 million results less than a second. People are highly interested in that because they understand we are in a difficult situation and we have a lot of issues. So their interest level is pretty high. And the governments are doing a lot of research, and the industries are doing a lot of research to come up with some possible plans to reduce and cut their emissions. What I want to say here is that, the result, we are having the 25 million result in less than a second. That means that we see and experience global warming and climate change by ourselves. While I'm looking for the references about the carbon neutrality, I try to find the policies related to carbon neutrality. First of all, our goal is to achieve net zero by 2050. It is very ambitious. 2050 is not that far away, just 40 more years to go. And we have so many guidelines how we can act out to reduce the GHG, what kind of action we can take at office and at a residential area, at home, and things like that. I just read through how we can reduce the energy consumption and GHG at home. We have to use high efficiency home appliances. We have to put the window frames, and we also have some reduce our consumption of energy. I just try to screen all the things related to the lighting. And the CO2 reduction should be a worth of 12.84 billion won by reducing the fluorescent lighting by 10%. If you put the number into home environment, we can save 21% of CO2, and we can also save 13% from heating and cooling. And that means the role of lighting is pretty big. That is a clear evidence to show that the role of lighting can dedicate a lot to reduce the GHG. But the thing is how seriously and how actively the households will keep with such kind of guidelines. And the households should replace their fluorescent or bulb with the LED, but not many households can accommodate with that. So we need to provide a lot of support for more households replace their lighting with LED. And there comes a carbon border tax, which is unfamiliar. It is led by EU Commissions. It's like EU decided to levy carbon border tax on imported goods that do not pay for the carbon tax, and they will start this regulation from 2023. They are now reviewing when is the relevant time. And the US government as well is now reviewing introduction of carbon adjustment fees or quotas for the products that failing to meet climate environment obligation. Because it is first time for me to see this word of carbon border tax. It took me long time to understand the concept pretty well. So there is some official announcement about this tax from US and the EU as well. Because I am the lighting expert, so I just think about how we can reduce the electricity consumption. So I just want to clearly figure out the role of lighting to energy consumption, and to be more specifically, how and if urban lighting can contribute to reduce energy consumption or contribute to achieve carbon neutrality. It took a lot longer time than I expected. So I just tried to look up all relevant references. This is the list of the countries who link based on their electricity consumption. The number one consumer, China, which will be followed by United States, India, Russia, Japan, Brazil, Canada, Korea, Germany, France. These are the 10 largest electricity consumer. And if you break that down into, then these countries consume much more energies than the other countries. In particular, China consumes more energies than the other countries' consumption combined. It surprised me a lot. We understand that China is the factory of the world, but they consume a lot of the energy, and I even wonder if their utility bill is cheaper. So the 10 countries are consuming the are 10 largest electricity consuming countries are taking up 49% of the global population. So they are a big country with a large population. So that's one of the reasons why they need to consume a lot more electricity. So now and then I just move to think about their lighting status. 19% of the electricity have been consumed by the lighting. This is kind of a standard so far. And all the data starts from this number. So electricity consumes 19% of electricity. Let's say there are 208 countries around the world, and then we can just apply 90% of their each individual country's energy are consumed by the lighting. So I just divided all the data into Asia and non-Asia. Asia consumes 55% of the energy, and that means every year, the Asian countries spend 2.4 gigawatt hour for lighting. I don't expect you can get this number in one glass, but it's a pretty big number.
액션 그래서 유럽
UN also released the similar data, and they released some guideline to respond to the climate change. If you go down, then there is a word of science, solution, solidarity. To respond better to the climate change, we have to be based on science, and we have to have a better solution, and we have to move based on solidarity. So these are the keywords for me to think about the lighting. Lighting is a science. Lighting can be a solution, and lighting also requires solidarity to improve better. So as I mentioned earlier, the electricity consumed by lighting in Asia is about 2.4 million gigawatt per year. So to achieve a livable future, or to achieve a livable climate, GHG gas emission must be reduced to net zero by 2050. So I start thinking about this word, net zero. It's impossible to achieve net zero in lighting alone. Or the total energy for the lighting can be net zero if we are utilizing the alternative energies. So as I mentioned, we are consuming 2.4 million gigawatts per year for the lighting energy. So I think LED, IoT technologies can be the core solution for the sustainable world and the smart city. So I just try better understand the LED and IoT and their relations with the reduction of GHG. This is my way to trip to Gangwon-do. I just tried to pass through the tunnel, but there was no single other cars. So I took a picture. There was no cars inside the tunnel, but the inside the tunnel is very bright. One on the left is LED, the other is fluorescent. So I just wonder why they just have these two lines. So the first keyword is science. We have to consider science, solidarity, and solution here while I'm looking at this kind of a situation. I think there is apartment, load power, and the hospitals around that. The road tower has a lot of lighting science, and the billboard is having many solutions like BNS and controlling, and apartment complexes can be a source of solidarity because a lot of people live together. So when we are having the climate action released by the UN, we can utilize these three keywords in our environment. I can see some possibility. This is some very old isle of Seoul. Actually, this is home to my mother. And compared to some advanced area of city, some old city, old downtown, may have a possibility to apply the solidarity. There is a metallium and many different types of lighting are present here, and we can replace them with a smarter or LED lighting. And there is a CCTV on the lighting pole, and that can be integrated with the smart technologies. That means there can be a solution. This is cross in front of my hometown. You know, even if you are taking a picture in the night, you can take a very clear picture because it has so many street lights. So let me just go back to the point. So there are one good case in point. This is a Gwanghamun and Cheonggyecheon stream in the downtown of Seoul, and the colors are very little different. I just asked to the borough of this area. They say that to save the energy, they just put the smart function here. And this is a stream area because of COVID-19. Citizens are having difficult times. We try to give these kind of beautification feature for people feel a little relieved and feel a little happier, even after having a long day. And after COVID-19, post-coronavirus era, we will have many tourists, so it can be one another tourist attraction. So it is a very narrow area, but smart lighting and the beautification lighting were applied, and as a result of that, we can save the emission, which is equal to the emissions from 7 cars. So we can save emissions from 7 cars with 1,500 energy capacity with these small trial. So it means a lot. So we can scale it. There are many energies consumed around the world, which is about 24 million gigawatt, and Asia consumes 13 million out of it. And the Asian lighting, the street lights, the lightings in Asia consumes 2.4 million, and the street light in Asia consumes 256,000. And according to the one data released by Korea KEPCO, the Korean street lighting consumes 3510 gigawatt per year. If we save 50% of energy, then we can save emissions from 268 million cars. And if we save the energies 50% of streetlights in Asia, then we can save emissions from 28 million cars. If we focus on the Korean streetlights to save energy 50%, then we can save emissions from 0.4 million cars. It can have a huge impact. So the Ministry of Environment says that they just set out all the goals to reduce energies, electricity by category. And their goal is to save 60 million tons of electricity, 60 million CO2s from electricity category. If we reduce electricity consumed for the street light, then we can save 1.3% of emissions from the electricity. So I think that is meaningful and relevancy. So the role and responsibility of urban lighting should be based on science, solution, and solidarity. If we bring everything to the maximum level, then we can dedicate to save 1.3% of emissions from electricity category, which is not big, but it is meaningful. We have a lot of smart applications and smart lighting fixtures. I'd like to show you 2 different cases. The left top image shows the area when we turn off the lighting, and the right one is turn on the lighting. One of the roles of the urban lighting is improving and quality of the daily lives of the citizens. So when we lit on the light on the top tower, then it becomes the attraction for people to take pictures. I think that is one important role of urban lighting. We are talking a lot about the solar panel, street lighting. I take a picture which is on the bottom of the screen. Well, natural lighting is too big and too wide, so I just narrow it down to the solar panel street lighting. There was one day when we had a very bright moonlight, but even though there was a bright moonlight, we still have a very bright another street light, so we can save energy given this kind of situation. These days, we are talking a lot about the ESG, environment, responsibility, and governance. Actually, a couple of years ago, these three words means different thing. But these days, we combine these three into one single context. So we try to invest a lot to have more electric cars and hybrid cars. And where the lighting industry should be more serious about ESG, that is my message. So that is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much. If you have any question, please feel free to leave. While waiting for your question, I'd like to ask you the first question. Among different lighting policies, what should be adopted most urgently to minimize carbon emission? Well, I think that question should go to Professor Chang, not to me. But the most urgent policy can be divided into commercial and public and the household. The efficiency is the key area, just like Professor Chang mentioned. The improving energy efficiency is the most urgent out of many. I think there is a person who want to ask a question to you while they are ready.
Introduce. 네네네. 다시 한 번 더 소개해 주시고 질문해 주시면 되겠습니다.
Please introduce yourself first. Hello. I am Kim Ji-hyun, lighting designer of Neutrality. First of all, thank you for your lecture. We are trying to transit to the carbon neutrality, and many are working together. Many actors are working together. And you talked about smart lighting, street lighting. And can you share any other cases where the smart lighting can be linked to other industry? That is really difficult and tricky questions. There are not specific policies in the lighting, but as Professor Chang mentioned, the COSLA is the first policy to include the lighting into their energy-saving project. There is an island named Texel in Netherlands. That is the first area to get the subsidy from the EU to replace their street lighting with 100% alternative energy source. And I think that is the first global cases, which is very advanced. And if you expand your perspective, there are humble ample posts delivered in Europe. A certain area of the Europe, they try to replace 10 million street lights with smart lighting to reduce GHG emission. We have to have a policy to reduce energies in the lighting, but the lighting consumes very little energy, so our priority when it comes to the policy is a little bit lower than the others. But the COSLA and some other agencies lead the work to include the lighting into the policy.
Raised his hand, Muhammad Mansha, is that right? If you could please introduce
yes.
yourself and ask the question.
My name is Mohammad Mansha and I am from Islamabad, Pakistan. I am urban planner and working in Capital Development Authority since last 16 years. The presentation was overall very good. It was, I think, in my point of view, it was more about global warming, climate change, energy saving, and amount of energy being consumed by the world. So I think you should have focused more on city lighting, which is the scope of this workshop. And in my point of view, there's some things regarding your presentation about your city with the pictorial photographs and more illustration was a little bit missing. Please explain about your presentation regarding city lighting in the context of this workshop, please. Thank you.
So your question or your comments? I thought that this is your question. Actually, we're thinking about a city lighting because it's a very busy, crowded, because many street lighting, many flood lighting, media facade. And on the other hand, we have very rural area, we have very low energy consumption street lighting. I think that and the goal, we need to have think about a renewable energy. And then we have to think about energy harvesting technology for lighting energy source. And in order to have contribute a carbon neutrality on the lighting, I think that we need to have as I told you, a renewable energy and energy harvesting, and smart technology, and the remote management system. There should be a convergent to be a better contributor for climate actions. Is that your question? Answer to your question?
Yeah, but a little more I want to investigate in it. What measures you have taken to eliminate the CO2 emission and improve the city lighting in a smart way?
Yeah, that's already I got an answer from the Professor Chang, because energy consumption is directly linked to the eliminating carbon emissions. So this is almost in line with a high energy efficiency goes to the low energy consumption, and the low energy consumption goes to the low emission of CO2. So this is we call a formula, I think.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Peck, we have one more question. Please excuse my pronunciation. So Milan Ariel from Tarakeshwar Municipality, Nepal, asked this question. How can you integrate the carbon neutrality with urban lighting?
Yeah, that's today's my speech, my concern, and my question. I try to give you the same question because climate actions and the carbon neutrality is quite different terminology from a lighting so far. So this is my question to you guys. So I think this is because the UN mentioned that a science and a solution and solidarity. So I would like to emphasize solidarity on view of your question is how to link climate change to lighting. So solidarity is very important because as you can see that Korean Korean government is very progressive, but national awareness is very low. This is a gap between how to bridge the gap. Actually, I don't have any answer for your specific question because this is still my question.
Okay. Do you have more questions coming in?
You can still hear me?
Oh, yeah,
Hey,
Mark.
Okay. Yeah, no, hello again. Yeah. So this is not a question, it's also a comment. I totally understand these questions coming from you, from Tarakeshwar, from Islamabad. I think Baik's presentation was really interesting because it asks a very important question. And right now, I think we don't have an answer. I was taking part in COP23 in Germany. It was COP by Fiji, but it was based in Germany. And I think I was just the only person talking about lighting. And also, we know that those questions are, urban lighting from a city point of view in any case. So I think it's very important to say that the cities right now are experimenting some solutions to curb the energy efficiency, and we see that. Curb the energy, and make it more efficient for urban lighting, also with smart lighting. But this message needs to be much more, it needs to be, put forward much more to other layers of government. So I think these questions are very important. Does not mean that we can have answers so fast, but the answers need to be found together. That's a very important message.
Yeah, thank you for your comment. I really agree with you. Yeah, because so when I prepared this a PowerPoint, PPT, I really try to find as much as possible to find a data. But I can have a bunch of data from the other industry, like transportation, agriculture, and energy production. But specifically, it's very difficult to find lighting sectors. So, no statics, no data. So I think that is one of the role of LUCI, because I just found a small case of a small city, a small town, because they have only 190 street lighting replacement to street lighting, smart lighting, and then they calculate the carbon reduction from the smart lighting project. I think this is a very small cases, but it has very big implication to think about future of urban lighting and the future of LUCI. So I think that your role is more than important than before because of due to climate changes. Yeah, thank you for your comments.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any more questions coming in? Okay. Yes? All right. I can't really see who raised their hands. Okay, I guess it was going once, going twice. All right. So we will wrap up lecture 4 with this. Thank you so much, Mr. Pak, for your detailed lecture and answers.
Thank you. 감사합니다.